thank you so much. My name is Tara Galeano, and I'm a sexual empowerment coach at Rediscovering My Body. And this is my personal Facebook page where I have the honor of speaking with one of my mentors and former coaches, Darla Ledoux, who I love so much. Thank you so much for joining me today, Darla.
Thanks for having me. I can already feel, you said earlier it's in the field. I can already feel this is going to be a fun and deep exploration.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to this because I love you very much and I hold you dear in my heart, and I feel the transformation that you have personally gone through this year, and also how you hold that in the highest for so many women, for so many people, and that you're just like you're refining and crystallizing your skills around transformation. And so yeah, just love that. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. I'm super excited.
So I've been watching some of your videos, and just so much going on there. And what I love is, well, first of all, how you show up and that you're speaking your truth and you're in your integrity and you're authentic, which just makes you so much more relatable, because we live lives. They're not always neat and perfect or the way that we want them to be, but they happen, and we need to be in them. And I'm curious, what are some of the biggest things that you're seeing in the consciousness as people are changing and reaching for more transformation in their lives?
Oh, let's dive right in, right? It's like so much is happening.
Yes.
So, the first thing I just kind of want to anchor to people watching what we mean when we are talking about transformation, and then kind of where is it going? So transformation, my company's called Sourced, and we work with transformational leaders, people who want to facilitate for others this shift in awareness or shift in consciousness. So transformation is a new awareness that comes into our being, right? That permanently shifts the way we show up and interact with life. So it's like, I often go like this, right? There's stuff running the show in our life that we can't quite see, but it's there. And everybody's had that experience of feeling stuck, or like I'm bumping up against something that's limiting me and I don't know what it is. And so transformation is the process of bringing this here and going, oh, that's the truth about this. And then when we can actually see the truth about it, we can decide if we want to work around it, if we want to release it, if we want to bring it in and embody it in a different way rather than having it fight with us. And so that's what we're talking about when we speak about transformation. I know for me, when I started my journey, I was an engineer. And so I came at it very heady, right? And I love that you do work with the body. I think about you often, Tara, when you speak about the back of the heart chakra and receiving in through the, whenever I'm present to that in my own being, I think of you and your embodiment work. And so, but when I started, I was very much in my head. And you can transform a lot from that place, right? Where you're like, okay, how do I think about this thing differently? Yet the embodiment work, talk about where we're going, being able to actually feel it and know where it lives in the body or in your energy field as a pattern is even more powerful than kind of just getting the awareness. And in my book, I use a phrase, ahas are cheap, integration is priceless.
Love that.
And so we can be addicted to our mind figuring out what's happening as opposed to feeling what we feel in our body. So this year, I feel like I've had a master class at letting go of figuring things out.
Wow. What was the biggest thing that you let go of?
So for, people who don't know, I'm in the process of getting divorced. The short version is my ex-wife and I had a little bit different goals, and we were aware we had different goals, and we were kind of working with it. And we got to a point where we had to make a decision, what was more important. And at the same time, you know, she was doing things that were out of integrity with our agreement as a couple. And so what I had to let go of was really figuring out why and what does this mean, and all, like the desire to analyze everything that happened, as opposed to staying present to, you know what, this is just the energies are misaligned at this point. And it can be really, really easy to go into the what happened and who did what, and, you know, why is this happening? And let me understand it and let me make sense of it. And, you know, truthfully, even still at this vantage point, it's unfigure outable.
I love that. Yeah. And
It really is.
With that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, and I've been really conscious of the energy I'm putting out around it. Right. And I just want to give people, this is a total personal life thing, is if you're finding yourself trying to figure something out in a relationship and it doesn't make sense, it's probably because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we can just trust the energy of, oh, that doesn't make sense, because actually that doesn't want sense to be made. Right. The other person doesn't want you to make sense of it. Right. Then that's information about the energy.
Yes. Uh-huh. Which is really hard to take because we're so cognitive, right? And that we want to know. I mean, it's so culturally infused that we have such a strong desire to know. And so much of the emphasis of the knowing is cerebral in nature.
Exactly. And, you know, I was just brainstorming lists of topics for videos, and so much of what was coming through is just really the mind and the understanding is not all that helpful compared to the energy.
Yes.
It can help, like if you have something, a pattern that's running the show. So like I had put in my video, I need to be protected, right?
Yeah,
if that's a thing that's running the show, if we can bring that forward and go, oh, I can understand why I needed that, like that can be helpful to be able to let it go. But at the end of the day, it's an energy that has to be let go. So just understanding it isn't enough.
Yes.
Because if your body still feels I need to be protected,
yes,
it doesn't matter if you understand it.
Yes. Yeah. And what I love about that is that for me, understanding that is there is the armoring or the protection that we live into within our own physiology. And you can see that as, I mean, you can even see that there's different types of bodies because we hold energy differently. And so when we recognize those patterns, we can see it more clearly within ourselves. It's like, oh, okay, that's how I'm holding the energy. And when we protect ourselves like that, that's one thing. And then to amplify it, to join a relationship and have that protection, right? So we're going to step into this bubble. It's like, okay, maybe I've released the armoring within my body, but here I am living it again in a different dimension in relationship with another. And I felt like that was so powerful because we do that, right? We do that.
Yes.
We don't need to. That's what I get.
Yeah. So for folks listening who maybe don't know me or my story, I came out and started dating women, 9-10 years ago now. And, but I was still, you know, older, later in life. And I was really nervous and really afraid. And so, you just articulated something that's helpful to me, which is the armor I had that was, don't see that I'm gay, right? But was pretty strong. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, wait, let me let that go. Wait, let me. And then I allowed my partner to put me in armor, right? And put me in this bubble. So now it's us together armored, but that's still not freedom.
No. Yes. And so now that you've stepped out of that, you're really embracing this sense of freedom of who you are as a gay woman or as a woman exploring her sexuality. Because I feel like we really need to live beyond categories. This kind of, I was just writing an article last night about straight and the etymology of that word as it came forward in terms of gay slang. And it's like, straight and narrow, straight is a homonym for, bearing straight, where it is, a narrow place. And so it has to do with moralism. And I feel like, is that really what we want to infuse into our language as we talk about straight? And I'm like, well, let's just get rid of that.
Yeah, well, this, when I first came out, it's so interesting because this may go on a tangent, but I never really resonated with the word lesbian for some reason. But so I would refer to myself as gay. And this summer I sat with the word queer, and what does that really mean? And what is it to own that, which I noticed is harder for people like the straight and narrow people around me to embrace, right? That word. But really, what if everybody could embrace that word? And just because to me, it's like, oh, I am a sexual being of my own definition.
Yay, I see it.
Yes. So, when it comes to transformation, there's a lot of ways we could go. Obviously, I'm a big advocate that people become empowered in their own understanding of their transformational journey. And so, as I train other coaches and consultants and healers to facilitate this work. And my goal is to increase awareness so that when we're going through something that happens in our life, we know why we're experiencing what we're experiencing, and not cognitively, right? But it's like, oh, I know that I can lean back into, I call it source, God, the universe, energy, collective consciousness, however you want to think about it. When we're going through something, that we're actually held, and that it's always, always, always for our evolution as a being. It's always for our transformation. And because I believe the more we can hold that, the less stress we experience in the process. So, I also, as leaders, we walk our talk, or we live our message.
Yes.
And a lot of times that looks like things coming up for us to practice our message. So I feel like I've had a lot of opportunity to practice this year. I know you've had your own experiences. Yeah, like, oh, you think you believe that? Let's see. Let's just make sure that's integrated.
Yes, yes. And for me, what I find is that for myself, and certainly for people that I work with, it is I would say, pain body that distracts. And so maybe on a philosophical level, it's like, oh, I understand that, and I may live that, I may believe that. And then to actually know that in the body and to trust that feels like, okay, that's fine when things are safe, or I feel safe, or things are good. But to really trust that in the body when there's pain and my heart is breaking and my gut is wrenched and I feel that, and I feel like that's a hard place. And I'm so curious, how do you help people with that place?
Well, I'm first thinking of it from my own perspective, which is, were I not in this conversation for transformation all the time, my own experience of the breakdown of my marriage would have been, I don't even know. I can't even imagine, right? Because the level of, like you said, the pain body. So here's how I think of it for myself is I've done a lot of transformation, right? These things hidden from my view, like, oh, whoa, what's that? How have I been living like this? Or why is anybody around me when I behave like this? I don't know if you've ever had that.
Yes, I have.
I can't believe I have people. And so this has been an invitation into the body and the deeper buried layers, right? Where it's like we have to excavate it out. And what's been great is the exact series of experiences what I experienced actually excavated this energy that's been in my being probably since the beginning of time, right? Since my parents betrayed me when I was young. And then even further in the lineage, right? Like my parents weren't the first people to bring betrayal into this system and into the field. And so, there's a moment where I could be so present with that energy of betrayal and feel it and see it and be with it and not run away from it, right? Because I had buried it. Like as a kid, when that happens, we literally can't be with it, because if we did, it would mean our survival.
Yeah.
So in other words, if I really, held my father accountable, right, then I would not have a father. And then I would be a vulnerable little child without a father. And so therefore we just pretend everything's fine.
Yes.
And so moving through this process and being able to bring that, like all of that, right, and to understand that this isn't about my ex, although thank you for, triggering it, but it's actually about the pattern. The energy pattern was already in my field and I didn't even know it. In other words, I was an invitation for betrayal at some level because I hadn't healed it. And I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it coming because it just was the water that I swim in, right? Because it was so there since before I had a conscious mind. So in terms of how would this translate, what is the advice for people is to really understand that that's what's happening. Yes. And even, from the very first clients I ever had, between my training that I was trained as a coach in corporate, I went through a whole curriculum with a company called Landmark Education. Then I went to coaching school. And so from the beginning of my business, these things built for me and my understanding, to know that whatever my client was experiencing is just a repeat energy pattern from something that had happened in childhood. And now I have an understanding that it can even be, in the lineage, like maybe they didn't even experience it. They just inherited that energy pattern, in utero. And so the advice would be when something's happening, like stop making up meaning about it that's negative about you or about this situation. I could really easily be victimized, right? And then live with the victimization. But that does nothing for me or anybody, right? And certainly not my lineage. So what are you hearing, Tara?
Oh, I feel like that's just profound, soothing balm to my soul, because I feel like, yes, we need to hear that. And that is so true. So yeah, I honor the truth that you're sharing, that it's so important. And what I really find is that when I use the term stalking, and it's not like social media stalking. So that's kind of one of the disruptor terms, maybe kind of like queer, where it makes people like, what do they really mean by that? But it actually comes from this book, and I just want to put it up here. This is The Mastery of Awareness. And it is a Nagual teacher who is Central American lineage. And what she talks about is she's stalking herself because she's looking at the past and reclaiming all the agreements that she made, breathing them in and letting them go back to the earth. And that when we do that on a regular and consistent basis, on a daily basis, then we're reclaiming ourselves and all the agreements and the energy that we've put out into the world that doesn't belong to anybody but ourselves. And so we reclaim it. And then we can also do that where we're going back in time to reclaim those agreements that we've made with other people in relationship, for myself, with my marriage, my former marriage. And that reclaiming process creates such integrity. And when I do that, one of the biggest things for me, what I notice is that it's the anger then that I've held on to that gets dissolved. And when we dissolve something within our own physiology, it allows more in. So then I can really connect to the sun and that sacred sun that is within my heart. And it actually cleans me out. So that harboring or that energetic pattern where I was stuck, or maybe that armoring that I was experiencing that was contracting or contorting my body in a certain way, there's more expansiveness and there's more energy for that. And so when you were speaking that experience, that's what came to me. I was like, oh yeah, because I heard that also in the video when you were speaking about the bubble and how you went to revisit that. And I was like, I love that. And sometimes we don't have the opportunity to do that with a partner or the other person, but energetically, we absolutely do, because we need to, because we're so much more than this one dimension. I mean, some people might say that we're in multiple dimensions at once.
Yes.
And that our lineage goes forward and back. And when we heal something within ourselves, we heal it for the future generations, but also for the past generations. And that's what Lakota teaching says. And so I feel like you're onto something, sister. I love this conversation of transformation, because the way you speak makes it so accessible. And I love that you've got this engineer mind, because I see how you're orchestrating it and making it accessible to people, that they can kind of really step on board with you and like, sign me up.
Well, yeah, that's the goal, right? The more people that are really committed to integrating this work, then the easier it is for us as, practitioners or teachers to embody it and demonstrate it. And so, because it's scary, right? It's scary for someone to say, oh, that's just energy I inherited, and I can give it back. I can release it. I have lots of choices with it, which then puts us squarely responsible. And that's freaking scary, right? It's scary to let go. And so, a couple things that you said sparked for me. You talked about the anger dissolving.
Yes. That was my story for sure.
Yeah. And so this is another thing for people to understand, whether it's for you personally or with your clients. Say your client is angry, right? And, this could have been my consciousness at the time or what I was taught, but let's say it's anger, right? Even though we're talking about transforming it, a lot of times we hold it as, I need to fix that.
Oh yeah.
I can't have my client be angry, right? Like, oh my gosh, what if they're angry at me? Oh, they're always angry, right? And then as soon as we try to fix it, it resists. And so what you said was really brilliant, the dissolving of the anger. And at some point you said, there's more energy then available. So if we can look at the anger as energy, it's really potent, right? And so how, I'm just picturing it dissolving, and then that energy is freeing up to be transformed or transmuted, however you like to think about it, into another energy, passion, love, joy. And it doesn't have to be a happy one, right? It could be that anger transmutes into, some kind of fire for your mission in the world. So the things that we deem as negative, there's so much available there, right? The contrast is what sparks the transformation. So just in my example, it's been one of the hardest things. I think you talked about this kind of, it can be really easy to forget. I can't remember how you spoke about it, but it can be really easy to forget that, oh, this is for me. Because our human wants to attach onto the meaning. So just as an example, this is my second divorce. So I first was divorced from a man. Now I'm divorced from a woman, right? And I had a lot of like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think, that I'm like way too old to start over? All of these conversations, you maybe had some of that, which is all, coming, it's not the truth. It's just coming from this lower vibration. And so if I want to, I could see, it's almost like I could see the path, Tara, where it's like, oh, I could become this sad story of a person who sucks at relationships, right? Or it's nothing more than, oh my gosh, I healed my betrayal wound. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, right? And so there's so much shame associated with that we would have these wounds, right? Like, oh, how could you be, a walking successful human with a betrayal wound? Well, we came in with it.
Yeah.
And so we're collectively shifting the field, to pimp my book there. We're collectively shifting the field by having these contrast experiences.
Yes.
So I know a lot of people whose relationships are ending, who are moving or relocating, who are totally redefining their businesses right now, because that's where we are as a collective.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you name the shame, because what I find is that is oftentimes the biggest inhibitor, whether it is our shame or the collective shame, whether that's derived from religious or cultural messages, but it gets layered on us. And when it comes on thick enough, it strangles us. And then we're not shining the light that we're meant here to shine. And the opportunity, I believe, is that we get to be in this body, because not only are we working out this betrayal issue, or however it has manifested in our lives, but our ancestors have really got our back, because they want us to uncover this too, because we have the gift of being in a human body, that we can resolve this in a way that the spirits or the energetic patterns that are not in this 3D universe have the opportunity to do. So what a powerful gift. So instead of hiding, right, and the shame is just a veil, we kind of step into the light and be like, see me, I have wounds, I have friggin' pain, I cry, and I love, and we can be connected. And what a beautiful experience we can have as being human together.
Yeah. I have a friend, I just was listening to a podcast he did, and he consults with the government and the military. And he wrote an article about getting therapy.
Yeah.
And how there's a stigma that if you get therapy and you admit it within the military, you'll lose your government clearance.
Crazy. Yeah.
So we got to think about this, right? Like the entire government is not allowed to have therapy.
So they've pathologized it systemically.
Right?
Crazy.
Yes. And so, just to think about the level of stigma we have about needing support or having emotions.
Yes.
It's so integrated there. So I love what he's on a mission.
Yay. Thank you.
Yes. And then you've got, you talked about this, healing for the past generations. And there's a couple of things I want to do to kind of ground this for someone who's a coach or a consultant or a healer, or wants to be transformational in the way they lead, even in a company, to ground some of these things. That's what I love to do, right? Is make the esoteric.
Oh, well, yeah.
So there's a couple of things I want to say about this. People are probably resonating with the anger comes in and then I can dissipate it. And then what do I do with it, right? As a practitioner, we'll use practitioner, right? I use transformational leader. It can feel fuzzy, right? Like, okay, I know this is happening. I know this happens for me. I know this happens for my clients, but how do I create a container to support this happening, right? Because if I didn't understand what was happening in my life and get the right support as I've been going through this process, I guarantee I'd be a puddle on the floor.
Yes. Yeah.
And so as someone who's holding space for other people's healing, how do we know, and especially in this COVID world, you've talked about this, like now you're online, right? And you're figuring out, well, how do I say, what do I put out online as compared to what I do privately with clients, as compared to, and kind of sorting that out. So a I'll give one tip around, say, the idea of dissolving anger or transforming anger, which is you want to design your business in a way that you are holding this safe, sacred container for that process to happen. In other words, you want to invite people into a structured agreement with the intention that this is going to happen, that there's going to be some format of breaking down and rebuilding of the energy. And so, I'll just say a little bit, and we cover this in more detail in our retreat, but a lot of times people will be kind of doing one-off sessions.
Yes.
And it might be just like an intuitive session, like, here's everything I see for you, right? And then the client doesn't know what to do with that. Or it might be a one session and we're going to dive deep and bring this, and then there's the aha, and this is here now, but I don't know what to do with it. And I only had one session, and now I have this in front of my face. I can't make a decision about buying more sessions, or because this is in my face, right? And so understanding the flow of how transformation works and how to offer it as a business, to me, is super, super important. So I wanted to share that because we offer a lot of resources for that. And so if anyone is feeling like, yes, you ladies are speaking my language, this is what I do, but you're not, I call it your magic. Your transformational magic is like knowing when, where, and how to give it, and what goes in your marketing and what doesn't is really, really important. So if anyone's been with a client and oh, this is an amazing opportunity for them to heal, and how do I help them see that and know they're safe and be willing to go there? We offer a lot of resources about that. There's one other thing I wanted to share, which is when you talked about the transmuting this or transforming this, and it goes back into, our lineage. And we're going to talk, I'm going to keep talking about this. We have a whole day about this, or, half day segment about this in our event coming up, around then the story that we tell about it. And so this is, again, bringing it practical for a practitioner, but this is true for any human, as we tell stories all day long in our mind, right? You take a shower and you're thinking about like, oh, this person did that and this and that, and you're categorizing things in your mind into stories and understanding them. When we actually heal something and it goes back, and then that energy is no longer there for a great-grandmother, for example. Say great-grandmother was betrayed, right? I don't know if this is true for me, but I'm imagining it. Feels true.
Yeah.
And so in that healing, she no longer, her soul, her spirit is no longer in that conflict, right? So now, not only have I released that energy, but the story about it is going to feel different.
Yes.
And so I'm sharing this because we tell stories. I mean, you and I have told stories here today, right? We tell stories as marketers. And the other piece, you asked me at the very beginning, like, what's present for me about this work is, what story are we telling? And when you transform something in your business, it makes a lot of sense to go back and reevaluate the story you're telling.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, we don't necessarily want to keep telling the same story over and over again, because we just keep recreating ourselves as that person and our pattern as that pattern.
That is such a beautiful reminder. Mm-hmm. And I love the nuts and bolts of the practicality of this is how it translates to marketing, and that the stories that we live in are the stories that we live. I mean, I was a literature major in college because I love stories. I mean, it connects to the human
Amazing.
soul. It connects to the human soul that we love to be told a story and we love to engage in a story. And interestingly enough, as a therapist, I often tell people to cut the storyline.
Right. Well, and that's so true, right? Like the stories, that's where we learn. You know, as I was trained in my business that people are going to forget everything you teach, but they're going to remember the story.
Always.
And so the story illustrates the teaching, right?
Mhm.
And so the more specific we can be in sharing a story, people can see themselves in that experience.
Yes.
We just want to be aware of the vibration of the story we're telling. So if you've transmuted anger and you go, you know, you're going back to that story, the anger is not there anymore. You're inviting people with anger into a different vibration now.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Which is powerful work because we can all do that.
Right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I love the
Yeah.
reminder of setting the
Mhm.
container, because when the container is set and we're working alongside somebody in relationship professionally, that the container really is being held and we have the opportunity to step forward knowing that the highest and best will be served because we're engaged in this in a
Yeah.
professional way. And what I find for myself is that as a therapist, what I was working with you specifically was this transactional model of people are paying
Yeah.
for service, but they don't see the end because they'll just keep on going until money runs out or till they run out or whatever,
Right.
until the shit hits the fan and they're like, okay, I'm out of here. But when
Right.
a commits to transformation, when they commit to coaching, they see the end result and they're really walking towards it. And I love that because they've committed a finite time of, I'm going to do this for 6 months. I'm
Yeah.
going to do this or join the Shift the Field retreat for 3 days. And then they've made a commitment for what it is that they're willing to step into. And then if they like it, they can pursue it further. And if they don't, they're like, okay, it was an experience and I can let it go. But they've committed to something. And that is the biggest difference. Not to poo-poo on therapy, because yay that the US government is looking at that. And yay, because it's an access point and we all need different access points. But what I find is when people are ready for transformation, they need to connect with you. And they really need to connect with a coach that's
For
going to
you.
hold them, or with the container. Thank you. Yeah. That we need to have that set, because without
Yeah.
that, it's just going to dissipate the energy like a balloon.
Yes. And, you know, we might, as the coach or teacher, we might have a sense of what the transformation is that someone needs. Usually I have a sense of it, right? I can feel in their energy field what wants to let go. But I don't really know how did that get there or what's going to come up or what's going to happen in your life as contrast in the meantime. And so having that container, the clients I work with are really high in integrity. Like their integrity, their word is so important to them. And sometimes that can send them into their head to say, oh, week 1, this is going to happen. Week 2, this is because I want to control it so that I know I'm going to deliver you the perfect result, right? And so there's a process of holding it more loosely and leaving intentional space. And the more you do this, the more, I'm sure you've experienced this, you start to know about when shit's going to hit the fan, or the contrast is going to show up in their life, as another way to think about it. In our group programs, I'm a huge fan of groups and retreats. Like we design things in, because you can't force people to transform on your timeline, but we design things into the program that creates contrast for people to help this go here. And then we leave a lot of space to deal with this. Because if this comes here and then you try teaching something, a new concept, but this is here, like, wait, what do you, so we have to build in time and space into the program to look at that. And a lot of times people don't. They go into teaching mode and we're just going to give you information and more exercises. Meanwhile, this thing is here and I can't do the exercise.
I love that, because space is such an essential part to the work that we do. and that it needs to be brought in, it needs to be named, and it needs to be a piece, because that is where the integration happens.
Yeah. And if we think we have to fill the space
Mm-hmm.
because it makes us uncomfortable, or we're trained to hurry, or it actually takes longer.
Yes.
You know, I'm sure you've had people go to therapy who didn't have the container for that deeper work because of how they were thinking about therapy, right? Quick fix, quick fix.
Yep.
And so then they go forever because this is always there,
Yes.
versus moving it out of the way.
I love that. What a great reminder. So I love that we've had this conversation today, because I'm left with a whole bunch of things to think about and feel into more. You know, what would be some of the, I would say, biggest takeaways that you would like to leave with my audience here today?
You are divinely supported in this journey. You are not alone. And if, you know, a lot of times people who have been drawn to this conversation, it's becoming more common. It's a great time to be in this work. But a lot of times people who are drawn to this conversation have been the weird one in their family and their community, right? They're speaking up. I know you said you took the bus to the library to check out books on astrology when you were in high school, right? It's like, that wasn't, you know, that wasn't the norm.
Oh.
And so if you have felt that your interests, you know, I was in engineering, and then I would have these intuitive knowings, but there was no place for them. You know, I had to make a graph to justify any.
I love that.
Thought, right? Which is good training for this work I'm in now. But yeah, if you've been that weird, odd one out person, like, you really aren't alone. And there are people in this conversation, and the people that are drawn into my work and my world, one, they're learning to trust that, to be supported by source, right? Like, source has your back right here, where Tara says we get that masculine energetic support. Source has your back. And then there are other people speaking your language, no matter how, you know, if you're speaking about, you know, healing things in other dimensions, and you're, you know, out in that conversation, or you're here in the mindset of like, let's identify a limiting belief, let's have a conversation to bring this here. You're not alone. There are people who speak your language. And so find them, find us, get connected.
I love that. Yeah, because we're not meant to do this life alone.
Yeah. And, you know, we talked about the government not, you know, not being able to have therapy. We've talked about, you know, therapy being session by session, insurance based until the insurance runs out. Yep. You know, there are systems that are antiquated at this point, that the more we come together and build in strength and confidence, the easier it is to affect that.
I love that. That's a beautiful reminder. Yeah, that we can be active agents and create these communities, because that's how it has always been done, particularly with women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're the expert in that, the gathering of women in sacred spaces. I love it.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining me today in this sacred space, having this wonderful conversation. I just, so honored that you would share all of this wisdom that you shared with us today. And such a pleasure to spend time with you, because time is so precious. Yeah.
Thank you, Tara. And thank you for, you know, continuing to show up live and be an influence with people. It means the world to me, and to be able to share your platform. Folks who want to spend time with us, I think you're coming to Shift the Field Live. But Shift the Field Live is our event in February. Tara has a link to our special secret link to join Shift the Field Live. But we're going to dive deeper into this, the structure of transformation, the storytelling, the vibration, all the things.
So if people want to sign up, can they sign up today, or what would be the best route for them? I'll put the link in below.
Yeah. So what what there is to know is that the investment is $111 until the end of the year.
Okay.
And then it goes up, it triples. So if people want, it's still a value when it's full price, but if people want to get that discounted investment, and then also we're doing a fun thing where you can give a book to a friend. You can also give it to yourself, but if you want to gift it to someone, we're gonna package those up and send them to your people.
I love that. That's my favorite part, that you get to give that as a gift to somebody else as well.
Really, the book is amazing. It's really going to help people understand this stuff we're talking about. So, I often downplay, but this book is really going to help people. So if you know someone who needs this conversation, that's a great way to get it in their hands.
Great. And Darla, do you have a copy of the book? Can you just hold that up? Because I realized I didn't put it on my desk here this morning.
I have one somewhere.
I love it. Yeah, because I just want people to get a visual of this amazing book that Darla wrote, that I happen to have an autographed copy of. So thank you. Beautiful. So now you have the visual of that beautiful cover that was designed by Veronica.
Yes, it's gorgeous. I love it. I love to touch it.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks, Tara.
Thanks so much.
Hugs.
Oh, hugs to you.
I miss squeezing you in person. Hope to see you soon.
I hope so too. Much love. Have a great day.
Bye.